I like being alone. I've lived alone for most of my life since college. In my free time, I like being alone at home. I'll go out to the soccer field and train alone. I go on hikes alone. I cook alone. Being alone is fine with me. Being alone doesn't make me lonely. They're two different things. I can be in a room full of people and be way lonelier than I am when I'm alone. That's because loneliness is a feeling. It's something inside of me. Being alone is a physical state of being. Now, maybe you like to be alone. Maybe you can't stand it. Maybe you like it sometimes and not others. But no matter how you feel about being alone, no one, not a single person, likes to be lonely. Because when we're lonely, we feel isolated. We feel like no one knows us. Loneliness makes us feel left out, silenced, empty. When you're watching a video message like this, loneliness is not having anyone to turn to and whisper, "How long is the youth minister going to keep droning on?" Loneliness depletes our energy. It robs us of meaningful friendship. Loneliness is an enemy of joy. And joy, remember, is being content no matter your circumstances, because you have a source deeper than happiness and pleasure. If you're lonely, you're not happy. That's for sure. Joy and happiness aren't the same thing. Happiness is a feeling usually related to pleasure. Joy, on the other hand, is a choice. It's a deep down satisfaction with who you are and where you are. Joy is great, but it can be disrupted. And one of the things that disrupts it is loneliness. What's more, there's a profound and a pervasive loneliness today. It runs deep. It's everywhere. But most people would deny it. Maybe you feel it. There are so many interactions that used to be face-to-face that aren't anymore. We're meeting over Zoom, we're wearing masks in stores, we're using text and emojis and GIFs to say things that used to be said person to person, face to face. When we start scrolling on our devices, we can't stop. It's an endless stream of the lives that other people are enjoying more than me. The more adventurous, more athletic, more beautiful, more popular lives that others have, and I don't. Neighbors don't talk as much. Kids don't play pickup basketball on the street. There aren't as many barbecue block parties. People aren't going to church as much. Small groups have a harder time getting conversation going because life on a screen is a lot lonelier than we realize. There's a profound loneliness happening, and while it's healthy to put down the devices and look people in the eye, we aren't going to be a device-free world anytime soon. Devices were our lifeline when we were stuck at home during the pandemic. There was a lot that could have caused us to be lonely during that time. Maybe you felt it. I know some of our student leaders did.
As we've been hearing about, loneliness is a challenge that every single one of us has faced. Maybe it comes at school, maybe at home, and maybe in our faith here. This has become even more of a challenge lately because of how much we are forced to do through a device. It seems that this pandemic has made us all feel lonely, one way or another. And maybe for some of us, it becomes all the worse when we see the perfect lives of all these people on social media, free of the tiring, taxing, and boring ins and outs of the daily lives we face right now. Or maybe it gets harder for some of us because of a nagging feeling in the back of your head that tells you that your family and your friends don't really get you. These different factors compounding on each other make it hard to not feel some kind of loneliness right now. I'm no exception in this struggle against loneliness. Right now, I'm a sophomore in high school, and that means that the end of my 8th grade year and about half of my freshman year were fully virtual. I would consider myself pretty lucky that this time wasn't longer, but it still impacted me a lot. As I went back, I felt myself getting stuck outside of everything, even the friend groups that I had in middle school. In all honesty, it stayed like that for a while until I realized one thing. I needed to make an effort in myself to get out there. It may feel difficult to escape that feeling of loneliness that you may be feeling, and that is entirely okay. Loneliness can quite literally make us feel hurt in one way or another, and always makes us feel stuck alone. But there are two things that help me whenever I feel lonely, and I think that they might be able to help you too. First, it's never too late to try something new. It doesn't really matter what it is. A new club at school, a new conversation with someone you usually don't talk to in class, or someone you used to hang out with a lot, or even coming here to serve others. There's never a shortage of ways to find and build a new connection to someone. Second, always remember that God has your back too. In Psalms 23:4, it says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." You are never truly alone. If you feel like no one's there for you, don't be afraid to lean back on God for support. And if you want to try to reach out and try something new, keep leaning on God to get you through it, no matter how hard it may be. No matter what you are enduring, know that God is strong enough to take you through it and loves you enough to guide you the entire way.
We've given you plenty of bad news about loneliness, but here's the good news. Loneliness is temporary. There are ways to fight off loneliness. And here's the biggest one. You are never alone. To understand how loneliness can lead to better things, we're going to look at a moment that was terrible. It was a moment when it seemed like there was no good news at all. It was the moment Jesus was crucified. Here's what it says in John 19. So they took Jesus, and carrying the cross himself, he went out to what is called the place of the skull, in Hebrew, Golgotha. There they crucified him, and him with two others, one on either side with Jesus in the middle. Pilate also had an inscription written and put on the cross. It read, "Jesus the Nazarene, the King of the Jews." Jesus, this man who had thousands of people following him, is all of a sudden totally alone. He's hung on a cross. Being alone doesn't mean that you're lonely, but in this case, everyone deserted him. All his friends and followers left, except for 3 people. Standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary of Magdala. After this, aware that everything was now finished, in order that the scripture might be fulfilled, Jesus said, "I thirst." There was a vessel filled with common wine, so they put a sponge soaked in wine on a sprig of hyssop and put it up to his mouth. When Jesus had taken the wine, he said, "It is finished." And bowing his head, he handed over his spirit. That's the terrible end to the earthly life of Jesus. He's thirsty, and there's a moment that he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" What could be lonelier than feeling like God has left you? Just moments later, he bows his head and dies. It is finished. But that wasn't the end. Because from that loneliness, Jesus found a way to connect with every person, to never be alone, to never leave us or forsake us. He shared in our suffering. He understood our loneliness. He took our place and our punishment, and then he rose from the dead, told us to not be afraid, and showed us that loneliness cannot steal our joy unless we allow it to. When he was on the cross, Jesus had every reason to be lonely. Yet when Jesus was on the cross, when he could have felt like God had deserted him, when he was in the loneliest of circumstances, I bet Jesus had joy. Now that sounds crazy, I realize, but here's my thinking. He had total confidence he was doing exactly what his Father intended for him to do. So while he could have been lonely on the cross, I don't think he was. Jesus went on the cross so we didn't have to. He also went to the loneliest place he could so that he could come out of the tomb and tell us, you are never alone. He shows us that we can be alone without being lonely. Notice though that even though he was alone on the cross, even though his friends had deserted him, and even though he was wrongly convicted, even though he was in unbearable pain, he still had 3 people there with him. Mary Magdalene, and John. He wasn't totally alone. Neither are you. You're never the only one who is lonely. Let me repeat that. You are never the only one who's lonely. The song Broken by Lovely the Band expresses this perfectly. It says this, I like that you're broken like me. Maybe that makes me a fool. I like that you're lonely like me. I could be lonely with you. Look, I can't take away your loneliness. You will feel it at times in life. We can have times when friends fail us. We can feel like no one gets us. And there's that profound loneliness in our world. But here's my encouragement to you. Don't be lonely alone. Realize there is always someone that you can be lonely with. And when you're lonely together, your loneliness slowly fades away. The opposite of loneliness is connection, real and deep and true connection between people. That's where joy is rediscovered in the face of loneliness. As Jesus hung on the cross, he spoke to Mary and John. He made a connection through his pain. And he gave his mother to John to care for, and he said to Mary, "Woman, behold your son." Jesus refused to be lonely alone. And that tiny moment of connection was exactly what he needed to persevere. Tonight, you're going to talk about some ways to fight loneliness and find your joy. But it's as simple as this. Don't be lonely alone. When you feel loneliness creeping into your soul and robbing you of joy, don't let yourself be alone. Don't resort to scrolling. Don't isolate. You can find yourself again by connecting. Find the people who are at the cross with you. Don't be lonely alone.